The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over a quiet neighborhood in Cedar Pine Meadows where Olivia Parker pulled into her grandmother's familiar cobblestone driveway. Her car bounced slightly as it rolled over something unusual, sharp, metallic spikes half buried in the gravel. Olivia frowned. This wasn't just wear and tear. Something was wrong. Grandma Violet's blue-painted cottage, nestled between towering pines and wrapped in blooming rose bushes, had always been a sanctuary, a place of warmth, cinnamon tea, and whispered bedtime stories. But now a neon orange violation notice flapped violently on the front door, a stark contrast to the charm of the century-old home. Olivia stepped out of the car, clutching her overnight bag and a box of lavender scones, only to be greeted by a voice that dripped with artificial sweetness. "Welcome to Cedar Pine Meadows." Across the fence stood a woman with platinum blonde curls and a clipboard clutched to her chest. "I'm Beverly Mathers, Community Standards Chair of the HOA, she said, eyes narrowing on the blue house. "That unapproved paint color has got to go." What began as Olivia's weekend visit was about to spiral into a full-blown war, a war she didn't know her grandmother had secretly been preparing for years. The next morning, Olivia stood barefoot in her grandmother's kitchen, sunlight streaming through lace curtains. She had barely taken a sip of her coffee when a loud thud shook the front of the house. She rushed outside to find their mailbox, an ornate vintage cast iron piece Violet had preserved for decades, smashed in two, dangling by a single bolt. A second orange violation notice fluttered in the breeze. "Improper mailbox style, immediate replacement required." It was the second violation in as many days. As Olivia stooped to retrieve the notice, Beverly Mathers sauntered down the sidewalk, sipping from a glittery pink travel mug. "Terrible about your mailbox," she said, almost gleefully. "Vandals, no doubt. This neighborhood used to be so safe before the older homes started becoming an eyesore." Olivia stared her down. "It was fine until you people started writing up infractions like their parking tickets." Beverly's smile tightened. "We're simply maintaining standards." Olivia wasn't buying it. Back inside, she called her grandmother, who was recovering at a rehab center 2 towns over. "Grandma, why's the HOA targeting you? They've posted 3 violations in 4 days, and now someone's planted spikes in your driveway." There was silence on the line, then Violet's voice, calm but steely. "Olivia, go to my study. Bottom drawer of the filing cabinet. You'll find a box labeled Claremont Development. Open it." Puzzled, Olivia obeyed. Inside the box were dozens of documents, property maps, HOA bylaws, developer meeting transcripts, and photos of Beverly and her husband, Derek Mathers, shaking hands with a man identified as Graham Cole, CEO of Claremont Development Corporation. "I was going to tell you eventually," Violet said. "I'm not just some old lady with roses and a sweet tooth. Before I retired, I was a senior prosecutor for the State Attorney General's office, specializing in property fraud." Olivia's breath caught. "You're investigating the HOA?" "Not just the HOA," Violet replied. "Claremont has been acquiring properties in older neighborhoods like this one by abusing HOA regulations to push long-time residents out. Then they scoop up the homes for pennies, demolish them, and build luxury condos." Olivia sat down, heart racing. "You think Beverly and Derek are working with them?" "I know they are. And they don't know who I really am. Yet." Just then, Olivia's phone buzzed. An email from the HOA titled Emergency Assessment Notification popped up. She opened it and blinked. $3.50 monthly fee increase for infrastructure improvement fees, specifically targeting corner lot properties like Violet's. "This is extortion," Olivia whispered. "Yes," Violet said. "And it's time we fought back. But we need more than evidence, we need a confession." That's when Olivia noticed something else. Nestled under the documents was a tiny hearing aid, except it wasn't. It was a wire. "You're going to the next HOA meeting," Violet said firmly. "And you're bringing that." The next HOA meeting was held in the Claremont Shores Community Hall, a building that looked more like a country club than a neighborhood facility. Olivia arrived early, her grandmother's modified hearing aid tucked discreetly in her ear, a tiny red light blinking softly as it recorded. The hall slowly filled with residents, many of whom had lived in the neighborhood for years, their faces lined with worry and confusion. Beverly and Derek sat at the front, smug in their tailored outfits, flanked by 2 younger board members Olivia didn't recognize. At exactly 7 p.m., Derek tapped the mic and began. "We'd like to welcome everyone to this special session," he said, projecting fake warmth. "We'll be voting tonight on Resolution 23B, authorizing foreclosure procedures for properties with outstanding violations and unpaid assessments." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Olivia's breath caught. "Foreclosure?" Beverly took the mic. Let me be clear, this is about protecting our property values. We can't allow aged homes to sit in disrepair while owners ignore community standards. That's not what this is about, Olivia called out, standing from her seat. All heads turned toward her. This is about targeting seniors who can't fight back. Like my grandmother, Violet. Beverly's smile froze. Your grandmother has been in violation for months. And somehow, Olivia continued, her voice steady, those violations didn't start until Claremont Development submitted plans to redevelop her property. Gasps spread through the room. I have emails, Olivia added, pulling out her phone. Emails showing communication between Derek Mathers and Graham Cole at Claremont. They reference 7 properties, every one of them owned by retirees who've recently received notices. Beverly's face went pale. Derek shot to his feet. That's confidential HOA business. Not anymore, Olivia said, playing an audio clip from the hearing aid. Derek's voice filled the room. We increased the fees. Hit them with violations. Eventually, they'll fold. Claremont gets the land, we get our cut. Dead silence. Then chaos. You said this was about landscaping violations, someone shouted. My parents got fined $600 for a wind chime, cried another. Security moved toward Olivia, but before they could grab her, the back doors opened and in walked Violet Curtis, flanked by 2 agents from the state attorney general's office. She no longer needed her cane. Her eyes were blazing. I believe I'll take it from here, she said. Beverly's mouth dropped open. You're supposed to be in rehab. I was building a case, Violet replied, holding up her badge. Senior prosecutor, white-collar division. People gasped. The agents stepped forward. Derek Mathers, Beverly Mathers, you're both under investigation for racketeering, fraud, and conspiracy to defraud property owners. As the officers read them their rights, Olivia felt the tightness in her chest loosen. It was far from over, but the truth had finally made it into the open. The morning after the explosive HOA meeting, Olivia sat alone on her grandmother's front porch, watching the dew evaporate from the overgrown lawn. She hadn't slept. The words Derek had uttered in the recording kept replaying in her mind, so calculated, so cruel. She always thought of herself as a bystander in her grandmother's world, a helper, a visitor. But after last night, everything had changed. She realized she wasn't just defending Violet's property anymore, she was fighting for something far bigger. The neighborhood felt different now. Doors that had once been quietly closed now swung open. Neighbors she hadn't spoken to before, like Mrs. Green from 2 doors down, approached with coffee, casseroles, and stories. They fined me $150 for my bird feeder, Mrs. Green said, hands trembling slightly. Said it attracted pest wildlife. I didn't know I could say no. Neither did most of them. Derek and Beverly hadn't just issued violations, they had wielded fear like a weapon, isolating residents and convincing them they were alone. Olivia started organizing. That afternoon, she stood on a folding chair in the middle of the Claremont Shores Park with a clipboard in hand. This isn't just about my grandma's cottage. If it happened to her, it can happen to any of us, she told the growing group. They want us to feel powerless. But the truth is we're the HOA. We're the community. A ripple of agreement moved through the crowd. I'm starting a petition to hold a special election and remove the current board under our bylaw clause 9.3. We need signatures, just 30% of homeowners to trigger a vote. Hands flew up. People shared their experiences, dozens of them. One man showed a $400 fine for a non-compliant garden gnome. A retired couple confessed they were preparing to sell because they couldn't handle the constant threats anymore. By sunset, Olivia had 63 signatures. The next day, she visited the county clerk's office and filed the paperwork. She also delivered a formal report backed by Violet's evidence to the State Housing Oversight Board. The officials there looked at her with wide eyes as she slid the stack of documents across the counter. You're saying the HOA board was working with a private developer to illegally force property sales? That's exactly what I'm saying, Olivia replied. And I have proof. That night, she sat with her grandmother on the back porch under the stars. You've changed, Violet said, sipping her tea. I had to, Olivia replied. You taught me that justice doesn't happen unless someone fights for it. Violet smiled. I thought I'd have to finish this case alone. But now, I see, I was just getting it ready for you. Olivia looked out at the moonlight reflecting off the creek beyond the trees, a sense of quiet power blooming inside her. She wasn't just defending her grandmother anymore. She was becoming her. 3 days after Olivia filed the special election petition, an email landed in her inbox with the subject line, Urgent, HOA Board Response, Special Meeting Scheduled. She read it twice. The board had called an emergency session likely to counter her petition and discredit her. But instead of feeling intimidated, Olivia felt focused. This wasn't just a setback. It was an opening. She immediately called her grandmother. "They're panicking," Violet said confidently. "That meeting isn't about discussion, it's about damage control. Which means they're vulnerable." That afternoon, Olivia met with Marcus Reed, a soft-spoken retired city planner who had lived in the neighborhood for over 40 years. He was one of the original drafters of Claremont Shore's zoning design. "They've been bending the rules for years," he told her, flipping through old documents in his garage. "But what they did to your grandmother wasn't just unethical, it was illegal." He handed her a faded blueprint and a stapled packet of amendments. "These here," he said, pointing to a section in bold, prove that the creek lots are protected as conservation-adjacent zones. They can't be developed without a full environmental assessment, which they never filed. Olivia's eyes lit up. This was it. The proof that could destroy the entire development deal the HOA had secretly orchestrated. If she could show that the HOA had knowingly moved forward with foreclosure proceedings while ignoring zoning restrictions, she could blow their plan apart. With Violet's blessing, Olivia compiled the documents and created a digital dossier. She sent it to the local news station, 2 real estate watchdog organizations, and the Office of Municipal Affairs. Then she got to work on the community. She hand-delivered flyers announcing the upcoming meeting and encouraged neighbors to attend. Many were hesitant, afraid of retaliation, but Olivia reassured them. "They can't bully us if we stand together." At the same time, Tyler, a former software engineer and HOA member who had once been silenced for speaking out, approached her quietly during a walk. "I've been logging board activities for months," he said, pulling a small USB drive from his pocket. Meeting minutes, internal emails, and invoices that never made it to public record. When Olivia opened the files later that night, she found email threads between Derek, Beverly, and a local developer discussing strategies to expedite corner lot acquisitions. It was the smoking gun. By the time the night of the emergency HOA meeting arrived, the community center was packed, standing room only. Word had spread and the residents were ready to fight back. Olivia stood by the entrance, clipboard in hand, watching the board members file in with stiff smiles and darting eyes. They thought they were going to shut her down. They had no idea what was coming. Inside her bag was everything she needed: zoning documents, illegally concealed emails, and a USB with a neatly labeled folder titled "Evidence of Fraud, Claremont Shores HOA." The board had created the perfect storm. Olivia was about to be the lightning bolt. As Olivia stood at the podium of the packed Claremont Shores Community Center, the weight of hundreds of eyes pressed on her. She'd rehearsed her speech in front of her grandmother's mirror a dozen times, but now, under the flickering fluorescent lights and surrounded by neighbors desperate for truth, it was no longer just a speech. It was a reckoning. "My name is Olivia Grant," she began, her voice steady. "I live at Lot 19, the blue cottage on the corner, my grandmother Violet's house." A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Some of you know that our HOA filed multiple violations against her while she was recovering from surgery. But what many of you don't know is that those violations were based on rules that don't exist in our bylaws. They were manufactured to drive her out." She held up a binder marked Claremont Shores HOA Legal Code. No mention of retroactive color requirements. No mandatory mailbox upgrades. No restrictions against rosebushes. The crowd grew still. Behind her, Derek and Beverly shifted uneasily in their seats, trying to maintain their smug expressions. But they looked more like trapped animals than community leaders. "When I started looking into these violations," Olivia continued, "I discovered a disturbing pattern, one that didn't stop with my grandmother." She clicked the remote in her hand. A projector lit up the screen behind her, displaying the map Tyler had helped her create. Red dots marked each property targeted with escalating violations over the past year, most of them belonging to elderly or long-term residents. They created a paper trail of fake violations, inflated special assessments, and harassed homeowners into foreclosure. And they did it to clear the way for one thing: development. At your expense. Gasps filled the room. "They want to turn our neighborhood into a luxury cul-de-sac with generic condos and no history left behind. But we're not just lot numbers. We're families. We're retirees. We're teachers, nurses, veterans. And we deserve better." From the back row, someone clapped. Then another. Soon, a wave of applause surged through the room. Olivia's chest swelled, not with pride, but with conviction. She glanced at her grandmother seated near the aisle, her eyes misty, her chin lifted in quiet pride. Olivia turned to the board. You used your positions to bully, silence, and profit. That ends tonight. She walked to the table, pulled out a sealed manila envelope, and placed it in front of Derek. This is a cease and desist notice from the State Attorney General's office. You are being investigated for zoning fraud, property rights violations, and abuse of power. Beverly's face turned ashen. Derek's jaw clenched. Olivia turned back to the room. And I'm formally requesting a board-wide vote of no confidence to remove the current leadership and install temporary trustees until new elections can be held. A murmur swelled into cheers. Dozens of residents stood to second her motion. In that moment, Olivia wasn't just defending her grandmother. She was leading a movement. 6 weeks later, Claremont Shores didn't just look different. It felt different. Gone were the fear-laced glances between neighbors, the whispered complaints, the sense that everyone was waiting for the next orange violation notice to land on their doorstep like a bomb. Instead, laughter drifted across the neighborhood. On a warm Saturday morning, Olivia stood on her grandmother Violet's front porch, painting a wooden sign with careful strokes. The bright sky-blue cottage behind her had become more than just a house. It was a symbol of resilience. The sign read, "Welcome to Violet's Corner, where community comes first." Behind her, the smell of fresh bread and barbecue wafted through the air. The new HOA board, led by neighbors, not developers, had declared this weekend the first annual Claremont Community Day. Tables lined the sidewalks with homemade goods, lemonade, art projects from local school kids, and even a violation toss game that let folks hurl orange paper balls into trash cans for prizes. Laughter rang out as Mrs. Abernathy, once terrified of speaking up, now led a gardening demonstration near the community center. Tyler manned a booth teaching basic home security tips. Sophia gave out hand-stitched pillows that read, "We are not for sale." And Olivia, she was the hero everyone wanted to thank. But all she did was smile and redirect the praise. "I just followed my grandma's lead," she told the local reporter with a grin. Violet stood nearby, leaning lightly on a cane she barely needed anymore. The news story had gone national after the Attorney General confirmed the charges against Richard, Karen, and Robert Thompson. 27 families across the county had come forward with similar stories, inspired by what Olivia and Violet had done. And the resort project? That Pinnacle Development had pulled out of the region entirely after Robert's arrest. Their vision for Claremont Shores had crumbled beneath the weight of justice and the unwavering bond of community. Later that afternoon, Olivia and Violet sat side by side on the porch swing, sipping sweet tea. "Remember when they said I'd be forced out in a month?" Violet chuckled, her gaze sweeping across her rose garden in full bloom. "They didn't know who they were dealing with," Olivia replied with a grin. "You were never just a sweet old lady with a porch swing. You were the storm they never saw coming." Violet laughed, a sound full of life and satisfaction. "You know," she said softly, "when your grandfather and I bought this house 50 years ago, it wasn't because it was fancy. It was because it had soul. Just like this neighborhood. And just like you." A young girl ran up from the street, holding a paper certificate. "Miss Olivia, you won Neighborhood Legend of the Year." Olivia took the paper, heart full. They hadn't just saved a home. They'd saved a way of life. At its core, this story reminds us that courage doesn't always come with a badge or title. It can come from a grandmother with a cane and a granddaughter with a backbone. When corruption hides behind layers of bureaucracy and rules, it takes ordinary people asking extraordinary questions to peel those layers away. Olivia and Violet didn't just protect a piece of property. They protected history, dignity, and a way of life. Their fight proved that community is more than location. It's the people who refuse to let it fall. And even when the odds are stacked, truth, armed with evidence, resilience, and unity, has a way of flooding the darkness with light. If you suspect unfair practices in your neighborhood, document everything. Keep records, photos, and timelines. Research your state's HOA and property laws. Many residents don't realize how much power they have when they're informed. Most importantly, talk to your neighbors. One voice might be dismissed, but many together can shift the entire narrative. Don't be afraid to ask questions, request public records, or attend meetings even if they feel uncomfortable. And if you feel overwhelmed, reach out to local housing authorities or legal aid organizations. Like Olivia and Violet, you don't have to take on injustice alone. Community is your greatest weapon.